Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. Hi, I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. This evening's edition will host Legislative Issues with Jim Parisi, where we bring the legislature into your living room. We hope you enjoy this edition of Legislative Issues and Labor Vision.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field rep with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. The last show we taped was a review of the 2014 year as far as the AFL-CIO, the labor movement, and working people. And this year, this session is a new one. 2015. The session is just starting. And we thought we'd bring George Nee back into the studio to talk about what the plans are for this year. George, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. And thanks again for your service to the labor movement by hosting this show.
That's what happens when you volunteer in this business one time. It turns into a five-year commitment.
He's doing a good job. Let's leave him there.
All right, so we had a good year last year, as we just talked about. But what do we have on tap for projects that the labor movement is working on in 2015?
Well, let me just start off by saying that I like to put this in some framework, but we look at the labor movement's agenda as the people's lobby. People, I think, unfairly categorize the labor movement as a self-interest group or all these terms that people throw around, special interests, and we just don't buy that, because our agenda is to fight for improvements in people's working conditions, health and safety conditions, health insurance, education, taxes. So our agenda is pretty broad. And oftentimes some of the things that we advocate for benefit non-union members as much as union members, and in some cases even more than union members. But it's all part of building a fair and just economy. So,
and I would add to that, because of where many union members work, we're also advocating for the clients, the consumers. I mean, teachers are involved in student issues. The providers of services to the developmentally disabled are advocating for programs, not just their own pay and benefits. So there's always the broad interest that we have.
There's a link, because people have relationships, and that's what makes for a strong community and hopefully for a strong economy. Mm-hmm. So we'll start off. The fight for the minimum wage is still an ongoing challenge.
Now, it was remarkable that last year you got a significant $1 an hour raise, right, a year after the wage went up in 2013.
Right. So we're going to try to do that again, but we're going to try to do 10 cents better. Our goal this year is to get the minimum wage up to $10.10 on January 1st of 2016. The reason we're looking at that is we want to stay consistent with our two neighboring states, Connecticut and Massachusetts. Both of them have already passed legislation that their minimum wage will go up to 10 or 10.10 on January 1st. So we just think it would be a matter of equity for Rhode Island to keep up with them. And I just want to share this just amazing statistic to put it into some perspective. Not that we want to pick on Walmart, but they are a notoriously anti-union, unfair to workers company. But the CEO of Walmart, you may not know him, his name is Michael Duke. He received $5,643.677 last year in compensation. $5,643,000. That means he made $2,713 an hour. $2,713 an hour. So if you're the minimum wage worker that works for Walmart at $9, you have to work 300 hours to make what he makes in an hour.
Right.
So the average compensation worker to pay ratio in Rhode Island is one of the worst in the country, 460 to 1. So this is a matter of fairness, it's a matter of equity, and it's a matter of building the economy from the bottom up. You put money in workers' wages in their pockets, they spend the money in the economy, it helps the small business community. I was actually very encouraged, the last two articles that happened this year, they interviewed a lot of business owners, and particularly in the nonprofit sector and in the retail sector. And the owners and of these establishments recognized that. They said it's not fair to have people make those kind of wages, and we benefit when people do that. So that will be a challenge for this year.
As an aside, there is some talk in the State House about maybe some cuts to social service programs, which is yet to be delivered. But what better way to promote, the economic well-being of low-wage workers than just raise the minimum wage so they can, provide work, provide a service, but also make enough money so maybe they don't need all the social service programs.
Well, I think that's always been the goal is to, if there's more people can work at a decent wage level, then we'll have the resources needed to take care of the people that always needed to be taken care of. But we can't have a huge number doing that, taking care of, because we just don't have the resources to do it. So you're right, the more people we can get into the workforce, the better. Other issue that we're very concerned about is our friends from the mayoral academies. These are the, I call them the charter schools on steroids. For some reason, people have decided that mayors know more about education than they know about plowing streets. So I think that it'd be better if they spent their activity on the other stuff. But they've all become experts in education. They created this entity called mayoral academies. But here's what they did. So you don't have to be part of the pension system. So you can go to work there, we'll decide what to do with you, but you don't have to be part of the pension system. And you don't have to be subject to the prevailing wage law. So if we build a building there, even if it's with public funds, you're exempt. We feel that's inherently unfair. The people who work the mayoral academy should be in the pension system the same way the public school teachers are and the people in the charter schools are. And it would benefit our pension system, and it would be equitable for everybody.
It sure is unfair when regular public school districts and independent charters have to contribute to pay off, this pension debt that we've created over decades.
And they just get a free ride. And they don't, they say that we'll put them in a 401k. They're not obligated to. They can do whatever they want.
They can.
Also, we're very concerned about this school choice issue, this little movement that's starting to say people should be able to send their kids anywhere they want. That's a bunch of nonsense. This country was built on a public education system, and we've got to expose those people for the myths that they're perpetuating and the fraud that they're trying to perpetuate on people.
Yeah, it looks like this corporate-funded group, the Center for Freedom and Prosperity, is going to try and foist school vouchers on Rhode Islanders. Yeah. I was heartened to hear comments from both the House leadership as well as the Senate leadership reaffirming their commitment to public education.
Yeah, and I think we could look. The best thing that group could do is tell us how they get their money and where it comes from, and they hide behind this good government group, and they're into all this transparency except for their own group, which they don't want to tell anyone what they're doing. So, that's obviously a concern.
Sure.
Just a little bit on the defensive. Oh, well, actually, we have a terrific system in Rhode Island called TDI, Temporary Disability Insurance. We have some groups out there that want to dismantle that or change it fundamentally. We will oppose that. The TDI system has worked very, very well. It puts a lot of money back into the Rhode Island economy. It's paid for by the workers. I've been in this job since 1983, not as president, but working for the AFL-CIO. Since 1983, I've never heard one group of union members or one group ever come to us and say, we've got to do something about the TDI system. We don't want to pay money out of our pocket. People understand how valuable it is. We'll fight to keep that.
And Rhode Island was able to join the small list of states that now provide some short-term temporary caregiver insurance. Gail Golden, senator from the East Side, came on our show to talk about it. That program wouldn't be available if we didn't have a TDI system. And
it's a social insurance program, so you can't say, people can buy it if they want. There's an advantage like Social Security and unemployment insurance when it's a social insurance program, not just something that you can get. Because some employers may not even offer it if it was voluntary. Another issue related somewhat to that is efforts to try to restrict or eliminate unemployment benefits for what they are referring to as seasonal workers, which they're not defining, but we define it. It could mean hotel workers, landscapers, restaurant industry, certainly construction industry. These are people that are working. You collect unemployment based on how much you've earned. And they're trying to just take whole groups of people and take them out of the unemployment system. So we'll be fighting against that. One of the things that we're looking at this year is we've had a lot of discussion about the independent contractors versus regular, legitimate employees versus when people are misclassified as independent contractors. And right now we have a registry for independent contractors. It's at the Department of Labor Training. It's only for workers' comp. We want to move that registry to, they only register now once, that's it. So if you registered as an independent contractor in 1995, that's the only time you have to do it. We want to move that from the Department of Labor and Training to the Department of Revenue and have a $50 yearly fee to register as an independent contractor. There are legitimate independent contractors. They should register the same way that independent business or independent contractors do if they run in a business, or other professionals. If you are one, fine. Pay a fee yearly, register up there, put your social security number on the form, and now the registry, Department of Revenue can check to make sure that you're really an employee, really an independent contractor and not an employee. We think that'll bring in a lot of revenue to the state of Rhode Island and end the cheating that's going on.
Because there's more enforcement if they're under the Department of Revenue.
I think people would think twice about going up there and saying, I am really an independent contractor and I'm willing to state my name and sign an affidavit to that, knowing full well that you'll be checked.
Sure.
So that could do a lot, because we still have an underground economy. When times are tough, people, and by the way, it comes from both sides. Sometimes the worker figures it's a way to get money in their pocket, cash, not report. Sometimes the employer does it, and then they get a competitive advantage versus the good employers who are playing by the rules. So that's something that we think, we've been dealing with this issue for many, many years, and this benefits, again, business and labor, protects the worker and protects the good employers. Yeah. So that's a good one.
George, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I think we've only touched the surface
I never run out of issues
of our labor agenda. But we're going to have some follow-up shows with some other labor leaders to talk about labor's agenda. And then this year, as we have for 4 years now, we're going to bring in the senators and reps who put in bills that assist the working person right here into the studio so that they could tell what their interest is and what they're trying to get accomplished. George, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney. Over the last many years, Labor Vision has focused on issues that we believe are important to working Rhode Islanders. And those issues such as wage equity and equality are still in the forefront for organized labor. So we're taking the opportunity in this show to have a conversation with a couple of experts. We have two very knowledgeable ladies with us in this show. Maureen Martin, who is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, and Abby Godino, who is a researcher with the New England Regional Council of Carpenters. And Abby, I can't wait to get to the researcher and the carpenters here, because I don't think it's talking about 2x4s.
No.
But anyway, Maureen, let's get started. Let's have a conversation. We had some preliminary conversation before the show about an organization called CLU, addressing women in labor. And I know that women have been involved in labor for many, many years, but you're instrumental in starting this organization in Rhode Island now. What is it and why now?
Sure. So CLU is the Coalition of Labor Union Women, started about 40 years ago when a group of women who were working within their labor unions thought they didn't really have a way of talking about their women's issues. And so they did a shout out to some other labor union women and had 3,000 people show up, and thus became the Coalition of Labor Union Women, which is a constituent group within the AFL-CIO. And I would say in the 1990s, we had a chapter in Rhode Island, and it was very instrumental in training women for leadership within their unions, supporting women in their workplaces, and teaching them how to have a voice at work and stand up for themselves, and to become more politically involved in politics. And we haven't had that chapter organized for some time, and it just seems that now is the time where there's this national conversation going on about low-wage workers, and they're predominantly female workers in many of the groups of workers who are challenged every day to make a minimum wage even. And so last year, a few of us started talking, and we didn't get 3,000 people show up, but we've had a good show up of, I would say, about 40 women in Rhode Island from 15 different labor unions and organizations. And we're really looking forward to getting chartered next month, and I'm very proud to be the interim president of the chapter. And we hopefully, I think one of the things that I'm hoping is that this will be a vehicle to bring younger women into the labor union community and kind of move them up and give them a voice within their labor unions, at their workplace, and politically.
And I think it's so important to do that. I think organized labor has made a real commitment to education and training of everybody, whether it be union leadership or members of the various unions, in an attempt to provide that level playing field and give people the opportunity to bring about new and innovative programs, to be educated, and to ensure the equality within organized labor in the corporations and the businesses that we work in.
Yeah.
You asked Abby to come along with you today, which was a good choice.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Abby, a little bit about the work that you do. I'm really interested in hearing about the research component. From the Institute's point of view, the Institute for Labor Studies and Research, we really tend to focus on building programs based upon research, based upon what people need, and based upon what society and the changes in technology. You and I have had some preliminary conversations, and it's interesting to listen to the research work that you do that is involving carpenters and looking at who they partner with. Just tell us what you do.
It's very interesting that you say that. When I first came to work for the Carpenters, it was research that I relied on from people before me that really integrated me into knowing how a trade labor union works, which was new for someone, even though I've had experience and really enjoyed the labor movement. As a researcher, there's a lot of facets to my job. I think one of the most interesting, though, is that when a project comes down the line, there's a lot of actors involved, and a lot of the times those are, state agencies giving out tax credits and money. And so we take a look at who the developers are in these projects, if they're receiving money, if they're women, minority-owned businesses, if they're local businesses, so that we can have the play to make sure that local people get put to work and that we know that high-quality labor standards are met when compensating these workers. So that's just one part, and the more exciting part, I think, of my job is it's research, but it's more based in what's happening in the community, finding other organizations to partner with, groups like CLUE, where we can steer our members towards getting more involved inside and outside of their union, just so that we can build stronger communities in Rhode Island.
And I think those partnerships are so critical in not just the development of organized labor, but the work that we do, organized labor and non-organized labor, in growing our community and community-based organizations.
Yeah, no, that's right. There are a lot of organizations, or I work with contractors out there that want to do the right thing, want to build clean and legal, and partner with the community. But if the community is not there to answer, or the workers, organized or not organized, aren't there to answer, then the call is going to be lost. And it's been a discussion for many years about how do we address unemployment and lack of training. So I think these partnerships, like you said, are a great way to figure out what the workforce can offer, but what does the industry need. So making those connections is really vital.
Maureen, over the years you've been involved in creating and developing and growing partnerships with anywhere from the partnership between organized labor and the Salvation Army for the drive at Christmas, a whole variety of partnerships that you've been involved in. It would appear to me that the organization CLUE is not limited. It's for women in organized labor, but it sounds like you have a strong base of members, both male and female, it sounds like,
it is,
who are representative of a broad base of unions, but really have a basic interest in looking at the role of organized labor, but also females in the community.
Yeah. So CLUE is not limited to just labor union folks, that we have women and men who are not actual union members, who are associate members of the coalition. And I think that is part of our effort to reach out, just as you mentioned, that labor unions have been very responsive to the whole need of hearing women leaders, and to reach out to unorganized workers and into the community. And I think absolutely that the Coalition of Labor Union Women will have that as a high priority, reaching out and being involved and organizing unorganized women, and looking at workplaces where we might have something to offer, where women are being disenfranchised, and where wage discrimination and other gender-based inequities are happening on a daily basis at their workplace. well, we'll be able to kind of reach in, and if we can't organize them, we can at least work with them and teach them, maybe give them some leadership skills to learn how to stand up on their own, and we'll be there behind them.
And I think more often than not, it's even taking a look at the resources that are available and directing people to those resources. In light of that, Abby, you are one of the members of the class of 2015 in the Institute's Leadership for a Future. I know you think it's a wonderful program. I'm not going to ask you that question, but in all seriousness, how important is it for anybody, females or males, but in particular in this conversation, for females to have the opportunity to be a part of a leadership group with the interaction among all of the people who are there from the diverse pieces of the community, organized labor, community-based organizations? How important is it to you, and how important are those pieces in particular in your role as a researcher? How do you see it fitting?
It is so vital. I grew up in South County, and I like to say that I was always interested in social justice and economic justice, and I didn't know how to get involved. There's not a lot of activism in South County. It's a different world than being up towards Providence and then the city. So it took me a long time to find like people that had the same values, and even organizations that were working towards those things. So for any time that you can get a room together of people who are already leaders or emerging leaders in their organizations, who are willing to listen to each other and learn from each other, that's how we really get stronger networks. And so how this translates to my job as a researcher, you know, I find out this church might be building a new facility for low-income renters. It might be a great opportunity for the Carpenters to get involved in that project, put our members to work, but also take members from that community and integrate them into our apprenticeship program to get them high-road jobs. So there's an unlimited way that these connections can benefit us all. So it's really
well, and I think in many ways, Maureen, you'd be familiar with these, where organized labor has really made an attempt to be outwardly participatory in community activities, not just in organizing and on issues of concern in the community, but even when it comes to the skilled technical trades and the role that they play in voluntary construction of ramps and other places within the community.
You know, it's been incredible. I actually wrote an article about it a couple of years ago, all of the things that labor union folks do that benefit people in the community, nothing to do with our labor sisters and brothers. And building the ramps was a great story from the Carpenters, coincidentally. Even we'll be going, we're starting a new chapter in that book today. We're sending out something, recruiting our AFL-CIO and our broader community of union support folks to come join in the effort to dig people out of the snow. You know, there's a group called Serve Rhode Island that two major Rhode Island labor leaders are on the board of. One is Michael Downey from Council 94, who chairs that board at Serve Rhode Island, and Frank Flynn from the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers, who is the vice chair. And we had this notion that, considering the relentless weather we've been suffering, if not everybody thinks all the snow is suffering, but that we've been experiencing at any rate, we thought, wouldn't it be great to get the union people that we know are out there every day doing all kinds of things to benefit people in the community, and we could sign them up for Team Union Yes and get them out there working this. I know that this group has had a lot of volunteers, and they've done a great job, as I understand, but they're running out of volunteers, they're running out of time. Those folks have worked over and over and over again, and we have a couple more storms coming up. So labor union folks are the ones who are going to be jumping in and taking care of that problem, but it's what they always do. It's what we do.
And I think they have for a long time. I think most people in the community are probably not aware of the kind of projects that are taken by members of organized labor. In some cases, it's the Carpenters Union. And you know, Abby, it might be worthwhile for you to talk about just some of those initiatives, because I think what ends up happening, you're seeing the link here between CLU and those other organizations, where CLU will provide, like you say, the tentacles into those other activities.
Yeah, so the Carpenters all over New England are involved in lots of great activities. One I love is every year in Boston we help children build lemonade stands from children from disadvantaged areas in schools, so that they have an entrepreneurial activity where they learn to sell lemonade. Another that's really popular everywhere is building beds. There's a lot of shelters that do not have enough beds for people, and that's just one way that we can contribute. I think the most important thing to note is there's always this message that the union isn't someone from your community, but the members of unions are people from these communities, these very same communities. So they're no different than you and I, and just going out to help each other is the one way that we connect.
Well, I think it's really important that you said that, because sometimes members of unions and people who are not members of unions talk about the union. And in reality, it's not a thing. It's the people who make it up. So I think it's really important for us to recognize that, and to recognize the work that Maureen, you're doing in attempting to try and get a greater number of people involved in CLU, so that the activities in the community will be more linked to it, so that people in organized labor will grow and develop those relationships. For people out there, if they wanted to become a member of CLU, what should they do?
If you'd like to join the Rhode Island chapter, there's a first step, which is to join CLU National Organization. If you go to clu.org, there should be a little spot on the right where you can just click onto membership and go on and pay your $35 new membership dues, and I will get notified that you've become a member of CLU, and I will recruit you to be on the Rhode Island chapter.
I want to thank both Abby and Maureen for coming today. It is a long conversation that deserves much more time, and hopefully in the future we'll have the opportunity to do that. Forward to a conversation again.
Great, thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m. Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. Hi, I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. This evening's edition will host Legislative Issues with Jim Parisi, where we bring the legislature into your living room. We hope you enjoy this edition of Legislative Issues and Labor Vision.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field rep with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. This is the kickoff show for the 2015 legislative session, and before we talk about what labor is going to be working on this coming year, we thought we'd spend some time talking about how things worked out for the labor movement and working people last year. And joining us today is the person who would know best about what happened with all different aspects of legislation related to working people is AFL-CIO President George Nee. George, thanks for joining us.
Oh, pleasure to be here, and thank you for your continued service to the labor movement by hosting this show. So,
you know, this is my 5th season.
Yeah,
so,
and I know it's at some point an Emmy is on its way.
I won't be holding my breath for that Emmy.
Well, you know, we'll have to make sure that the right people vote on that.
There you go.
We actually, looking back on it and preparing for this show, for the labor movement and for working people in Rhode Island, 2014 was a very, very good year. We've had some bad years, so we know what to compare it to.
And the economy brought some really bad years, not only in terms of economics that people had to live with, but also some rights have been lost.
Oh, some rights have been lost. There's been some budgetary concerns. There's been job loss among state employees and municipal employees to balance budgets. So we've gone through some tough times, and hopefully we're on the rebound. But probably a very significant event last year was the largest increase in the history of the state of Rhode Island in its minimum wage. Mm-hmm. It went from $8 an hour, effective to $9 an hour on January 1st of 2015. That affects, you know, from the figures you get from the newspaper, different studies, about 40,000 Rhode Islanders are impacted by that kind of an increase. And for us, and for all working people, it's important because we believe that that's how you build an economy, from the bottom up, put money in people's pocket. They have some purchasing power now. It helps the small business community, and it's a matter of economic fairness. So that was a very significant event. So in the last 2 years now, it's gone up $1.45. So it's still not what it should be, but put it in perspective, the federal minimum wage is still at $7.25 an hour. So in Rhode Island, if you're making $9, that's $1.75 an hour more that you're receiving because the state did the right thing. And I want to thank the members of the General Assembly and the governor for signing that legislation. We also had some, I think, significant improvements on the educational front. A lot of controversy about the kneecap exam. I think the legislature stepped up to the plate and realized that a high-stakes testing, one exam is not the way to judge whether someone's ready to graduate from high school. Mm-hmm. So they deferred on that.
The kneecap is the New England Common Assessments Program. It's a statewide test that they give all high schoolers on certain subject areas, and they were trying to make it a graduation requirement. Graduation
requirement, and it was misnamed from the very beginning because 3 of the New England states don't even participate on it. So they should call it the half a kneecap. Also, there'd been a lot of controversy about teacher evaluations, particularly when the vast majority of our teachers do a terrific job and get a high evaluation. The legislature set up a program where if you got a good valuation, you didn't have to have it every year. People felt that that was taking a lot of time away from the teachers and the administrators and the superintendents to do that evaluation, and it was not in the best interest of good educational policy. So that was put in, and that was the champion on that was Representative Bill O'Brien, mm-hmm. who really fought like that, fought very hard on that one.
Yeah, we had Bill O'Brien on our show last year talking about
terrific.
The bill, and then Senator Mary Ellen Goodwin carried the ball on the Senate side, along with Hannah Gallo as Education Committee Chair. A lot of people were involved in that issue.
That was really, and I think that as time has gone on, the teacher's voice, we hope, is being heard a lot stronger than it had been. For a while there, I think there was the leaders in our state, particularly at the Department of Education, thought the teachers had laryngitis or something. They weren't quite hearing what was happening, but I think that's changing a little bit now.
I think it is too.
Yeah. On the economic development front, very, very good year. We've already seen some evidence of that. The legislature passed legislation for a nursing school for both combined URI, RIC nursing school at down at what they call South Street Station now. And that's going to involve Brown University, those two colleges, private developers, and that's moving, and that should be hopefully a catalyst to some economic development activity. That was done without a bond issue, so that can get going very, very quickly. We also labor movement was supportive on 4 bond issues, all of which passed. One of which was a $75 million URI engineering school to bring URI into the modern era, which is, they've always had a terrific program. I don't know how they've done it, given the resources they've had and the buildings that they've occupied, but this will really create a first-class engineering program for the great URI school that we've got down there.
Right.
We also had environmental bond issues that help our environment and recreation. There was one on transportation to create hubs in downtown Providence to have an intermodal effect with our RIPTA system and our train system. And the other one was the Council of the Arts, which is really creative. It's the first time they've ever done this. Number of entities to do physical improvements, and the arts, I think, are being seen more and more as integral to an economic development program. So
it's part of our cultural fabric, but it also generates a lot of economic activity with people who are the artists, all the behind-the-scenes people who work on all these shows, productions, and museums.
We've got a special niche there, and this is the first time I think people really saw that as being important. And interesting thing, the earlier polling showed that bond issue didn't look like it was going to be received favorably by the public. They did a masterful job of putting together coalitions with labor and business and the arts folks, and it passed by a pretty good margin. So that was very positive.
I think all of them also show a different direction, or at least a renewed focus on investment.
Yes.
And that's something that our newly elected governor has talked about quite a bit, that we really need to invest in our infrastructure, we need to make some improvements, and that's going to really move us forward in terms of economic development. And I think the voters recognize that message, not only in her election, but in voting on all these different bond issues.
Well, I think that's a good point, because you would think with the number that keeps showing up is the number of people who think Rhode Island's going in the wrong direction. People are very concerned about taxes. People are concerned about the economy. So here were 4, pretty expensive, significant bond issues. And when given a choice right in front of you, do you want the state to go forward? Do you want to invest in the future for your kids and your grandkids? People stepped up to the plate. So if you put a good project in front of people and they see some value to it, I think there is, people will respond to that. So I think that bodes well for moving the state around. So the problem with a lot of these bond issues is they take a couple of years to get moving. So we're actually now doing the chem building down at URI that was on the ballot 2 years ago. So these will, and also the Veterans Home, which passed a couple of years ago, is now starting to get into the construction phase. So it takes a while, but still we have to invest in the future if we're going anywhere.
Yeah, I got a lesson on that when we had Scott Duhamel on this show about the lag time. And I know the unemployment in the building trades has been high for a long time.
Yep.
I know they're anxious to get work, and it can't be soon enough, but at least people in those areas know that more work is coming now that these bonds have passed.
Right. We also had the second year in a row, which is, I think, again, an investment for the future and very critical to economic development, is expenditure for the Job Development Fund out of general revenue, which is the second year they've done that. But more importantly, this is something that's been a kind of a pet peeve for 20 years. We've had a thing called the indirect cost recovery, which took 10% of the money that was set aside for the Job Development Fund for job training every year, and it was just sent back to the general revenue. Just no rhyme or reason. It was done to balance the budget in the 90s under Bruce Sunderland. That's how old it was.
And it's stuck around that long.
It's stuck. Well, you know what happens is you get in, when something gets there, it becomes revenue for the state. And you make the arguments, and you make the arguments, and the AFL-CIO and the business community testified for year after year saying, wait a minute, that money is set aside out of the Unemployment Insurance Fund for job training, literacy, those type of programs. And it was never designed to be sent back to the general fund. This year, they got rid of it. So that now the Job Development Fund has an additional $1.3 million, which is now available, and the new governor now can come in knowing that that money is now available for some of her issues on job development. So that's a that was a significant victory this year.
So because of changes in the state law and the budget process last year, we're going to see more money invested in education and training this year.
Yes, and a couple of them are very significant. One is that the state of Rhode Island is finally recognizing the value of apprenticeship programs. They have traditionally been something that's been associated with the building trades. We now have a mandate from the General Assembly to use some of these dollars to create what are being referred to now as non-trade apprenticeship programs. In fact, I saw this gentleman this morning, Tim Hebert from Lexion Corporation. He has set up an apprenticeship program for the IT workers at his company. He told me this morning he has 20 people in that apprenticeship program now because he understands the value of the concept, and it isn't something that just has to be done in the building trade. So we now have expanded into what he would refer to as IT or advanced manufacturing. We have now one in the marine trade industry. Imagine this, Rhode Island takes until last year to set up an apprenticeship program in the marine trade industry.
And we call ourselves the Ocean State.
We do, we do. So these are kind of, I think, things that the General Assembly has finally realized. You can't say that job training and a skilled workforce is important without putting the money on the table.
Sure. So what else do you have for us in terms of last year's activities?
Well, we had two other big ones. One you might be familiar with. I'll save that for last. And the other is the parking garage was put in the budget at the Garrahy Court Complex. $45 million project. It's dependent on the sale and development of 3 parcels of land for I-195, that commission.
Because the Garrahy Courthouse is right on the edge of that new open space that we have from the 195 relocation.
And parking is still a big issue in downtown Providence, always has been, always will be. So the General Assembly put a provision in there to use funding to put it under the Convention Center Authority and use the bonding authority or bonding power of the Convention Center Authority, that if and when these 3 parcels are, ready for development, this could be a spur to that activity, because some of those companies that are coming in want to know, okay, if we come here, where are people going to park?
It's all about investing in infrastructure to generate economic activity.
Right, and I think we're finally getting it, and I think that bodes well. And of course, the last big victory was a very significant victory, and that was the defeat of the Constitutional Convention. And again, thank you for your service on that issue. You spearheaded that effort. As you know, that was on the ballot. It's required by our Constitution to have a vote every 10 years. It went before the voters. It was looking like it was going to pass, and it had all kinds of implications for working families, for minority groups, for women's groups. It would have been a very contentious and nasty process, particularly open to all kinds of the funding that comes in out of the state of Rhode Island, or from outside the state of Rhode Island. And that got beat 55 to 45. So again, that was a big victory, and that was one that if we had our way, it wouldn't get on the ballot every 10 years, but we were forced to deal with it, and we did.
And maybe we'll deal with that legislatively in the future.
Yeah,
maybe it should be every 20 years.
Or 50.
There you go. And it was tremendous for me to be one of the labor reps on this pretty broad-based community coalition. I mean, this was the labor movement working with Planned Parenthood and women's rights activists, the NAACP, the ACLU, a whole host of different organizations all sat down together to work on that campaign.
And it was a real coalition. A lot of times, as you know, people all put their name on something and they say, oh, I want to be a part of that. But in this one, you had to show up, you had to put up some money, and you had to work, and everybody did.
Minimum wage, teacher evaluation, a lot of new construction going on, defeat of a con-con. It really was a good year last year for working people in Rhode Island, wasn't it?
It even got better as the show went on.
Well, George, I thank you for coming in, spending some time talking about what happened last year. And folks, please stay tuned, because the next show will be George Nee outlining what labor is going to be working on in the 2015 legislative session. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Jim Parisi. I'm a field rep with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, but more importantly tonight, I'm president of the Rhode Island Labor History Society. We do some regular commemorations of important labor events, and last year some folks on our executive board said, you know what, we have an important 40th anniversary coming up. It was the anniversary of the death of a striking AFSCME member, Wilma Schessler. What we didn't realize at the time was that they actually named a street for, as we can see right up here at the corner of East and Wilma Schessler Lane. We thought there was a plaque here, but probably even more important, the name has been given permanently to this place because this is the location where the picket line was going on, and a Nage nurse drove through the picket line, killing Wilma and seriously injuring 2 other people. Most of you have some copies of some Providence Journal articles about that event 40 years ago, so at your convenience or even by candlelight, you can read some more of the details. But we just wanted to take a few minutes to commemorate the death of a striking union member who was out there because the state offer was inadequate and people were standing up for their rights at the time, and unfortunately someone came through the picket line at a high rate of speed, intoxicated, and someone paid the ultimate price of a labor strike by giving their life for the labor movement. And that's why the Labor History Society thought it was important to hold this event tonight, to spend a few minutes remembering an important event that happened 40 years ago. I'd like to call on the head of AFSCME Council 94, Mike Downey, to come on up here and say a few words on behalf of Wilma. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, James. And more importantly, thanks to the Labor History Society. It's a very proud moment for me tonight to stand out here and thank Sister Schessler for all the benefits that I have as a state employee. My name's Michael Downey. I'm a plumber at the University of Rhode Island, president of Rhode Island Council 94, but most importantly, a public employee. And it's people like Wilma. It's nice to see a street after Sister Wilma, named here at a very, very active local 1350. Doesn't surprise me that it would be someone from 1350 that would be out striking to make our benefits better. So I really want to thank the society, but more importantly, I came tonight to thank Wilma, because it's people like her that got me a contract that allows me to have days out of work. Makes a lot of people jealous, don't tell them all. But allows me to get time away from work to be with my family, take care of myself, and it's people like Sister Schessler that did that. She paid the ultimate sacrifice. I've been able to run around with all these different pickets and have a wonderful time doing it. And it's because of Wilma that I got to do that. So I'm here tonight certainly to thank the Historical Society, Labor Society, for remembering such an important person. But more importantly, for her to know, I thank her for losing her life to make things better for me and everybody I represent. So thank you, James, and thanks to all that made this night happen. But most importantly, thank you, Sister Wilma Schessler. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
I'm going to have Kwame speak, Kwame Lambi, who's the president of that local, speak for a moment. But perhaps before we do that, considering that we're here remembering someone who passed away, knowing that Wilma, after she died, was carried back to Ohio, where her family buried her. There was a long procession to the airport. That's one of the newspaper articles where other union members wanted to remember her. Perhaps because it is a vigil in memory of a death, we could all observe a moment of silence for Sister Schessler. Thank you very much. Kwame Lambi, the president of 1350, the local of which Wilma was a member of.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I thank you all for being here. And this tells us that it's good to be a union. At least tonight we are here in our numbers. And I also thank you all for the honor of our sister Wilma. And even though her life was dim 40 years ago, we are still remembering her She was a contribution to the local. She was a very dedicated member, and her contribution to the local is well remembered. May her soul rest in peace. And fortunately for us, we have Tony here, who was here at that time. And I would like to at least.
Thank you, brother. I want to allow anyone else who would like to say a word to come up here in a moment, but let me just highlight a little more of what you'll read about if you take a look at those newspaper articles. The actual 40th anniversary was last month. Our society was having another event in November and we couldn't pull it off, but the actual strike was on November 9th, 10th, 11th. Those are the dates. And when I was taking a look at the newspaper articles, doing the research on this, it was days after an election. And there was other articles in that same newspaper about this young kid named Buddy Cianci who had just been elected mayor. And there was some important articles about the strike as well. Not so many articles about the death, but there were some. The driver of the car, the nurse who also worked for the state, drove through the picket line this way. Went through the picket line. The pickets were, crossing this street and some other streets because the strike involved not only the workers at the hospital, IMH, but also the lab school, I believe the training school. There were other workers on strike. But this striker, once she went through the line, she actually kept going a couple of blocks and didn't stop right away. And that caused some great scandal, some great anxiety amongst the union members, some of whom I've heard from. I got a call from someone who was noting that she got off really lightly, perhaps because her father was a doctor working for the state government and was wondering whether or not there was a little bit of excessive leniency for someone who actually killed someone who was engaging in protected activity. So I just want you all to keep that in mind. Is there anyone else who'd like to say a word before we conclude the event? George, thank you. George Neate, president of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO.
I think that when we have an event like this, all of us, and I think Mike made a very poignant point. The way that we can best remember Sister Wilma is that we continue to dedicate ourselves and remember those who came before us and struggled and sacrificed and went on strike and in some cases, and in this instance, died, so that we can have a labor movement, so that we have a solemn obligation to remember those who made those sacrifices. And the best way that we do that, to honor their memories and honor their sacrifices, is recommit ourselves to the struggle, particularly in the difficult times that we live in this country and in our state, to continue to fight for justice, for solidarity, to improve the wages, benefits, and working conditions, and to make sure that workers have not just good wages, benefits, and working conditions, but they have a say in their life. They have a say on what happens to them in their communities and on the job. And that's how we honor someone who made that ultimate sacrifice. And for your presence here tonight, you're making that recommitment. And let's go forward and make life better for all the workers in her memory tonight. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you all very much for coming. For those of you who have a few minutes and you'd like to honor Wilma by having a drink, a couple of us are going up to PJ's Pub, which is a mile and a half or so up the street, past
Shell on the left.
and it'll be on the left-hand side.
Right across the alley. But I won't be able to go tonight, so my thoughts will be with you.
All right. Thank you all very much for coming.
He's a little underage.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.